All right, this is the Political Line Podcast. Thanks for listening. If there are any of you out there that are listening, I'm going to probably do this podcast starting on a weekly type thing. I think there's just a lot to talk about that I obviously can't get to and write about. So, I think doing a weekly podcast will be good. I don't know if anyone's going to actually listen to the podcast, but if they do, maybe we'll turn it into a daily thing. For now, we're going to do it one day a week, and we'll see how popular that is. So, and speaking of popular things, Congress is actually not one of them. Congress has a 10% approval rating, double digits still. So give them that; they're still in the double digits. But they are ever creeping towards that single-digit mark, that going for the gold. Just go for the gold, guys. So they have a 10% approval rating. There's actually only one thing that's more unpopular than Congress's 10% approval rating, and that's Congress shutting down the government to defund Obamacare. That is less popular than Congress itself, but only at 7%. So, Congress, you've got a ways to go. One way to help you get to 7% might be to shut the government down to try to stop people from getting health care. But, of course, even shutting the government down doesn't actually stop people from getting health care. Why, do you ask that? Well, I'll answer that for you. It doesn't stop people from getting health care because it's mandatory spending. This is one of the things that I feel like Ted Cruz and the House Republicans that he's tricked into coming onto his bandwagon fail to understand. Shutting down the government doesn't actually defund Obamacare. And we saw that because yesterday the government was closed, but health insurance was open. It didn't work. And why? Because it's mandatory spending. So Ted Cruz should learn more about how the budgets work. I think that would probably be a good thing for him to learn that. And if he knew that, then he, maybe won't shut the government down to try to stop people from getting health insurance. Maybe. Maybe. Who knows? So this is where we are. We're shut down. We have the votes. I don't know if you saw that 17 House Republicans have publicly said we will support a clean continuing resolution, a clean CR, if the Speaker Boehner, just brings it to the floor. And he's not going to do that because he knows that if he brings a clean CR to the bill, it will pass the House. It'll go on to the Senate, it'll go to the Senate, and the President will sign it, it'll become a law, right? He doesn't want to do that because he knows that if he does that, then there's going to be a Tea Party revolt, right? There are 80 lunatics in the Tea Party that are just waiting to throw Boehner out of office. Primary Boehner! How dare he fund the government? So essentially, the Speaker of the House will have a revolt within his own party if he funds the government. So here we are. So now the House is doing all kinds of gimmicks, all kinds of tricks. They're not actual they're just legislative maneuvers, right? They're trying to position themselves so they can end up blaming Democrats for voting against kids with cancer and voting against old ladies who need welfare checks. And they're just trying to trick Democrats into voting against a bill that's not going to pass anyway. So let me give you an example of what is going on. Yesterday, the House introduced legislation to fund some departments by piecemeal, but they attached a rule that has to pass with 2/3 majority. Of course, this is not normal procedure, so the reason they're doing this is because under normal rules, a Democrat could just introduce the clean resolution, which has the 218 votes to pass the House, go on to the Senate, get signed by the president, and refund the government. So they have to come up with gimmicks. They have to come up with rules that kind of mess with the overall majority, right? How can we get bills on the floor so it looks like we're doing something without actually doing something. That's the trick now that Speaker Boehner is trying to play. Of course, I don't know how many more days of this that they can take. Who knows? I mean, maybe they ride it out. I mean, we've got a debt ceiling limit that hits in 14 days, 13 days now, since we're at the end of this day. But I don't know where they go from here. I don't know what they do. What's the plan? What's the plan? I don't know if they actually have a plan. I mean, I think their plan is pretty dependent on Democrats caving, but there's nothing to cave to. So in a normal situation, you have two parties that come to the table and they say, this is our position, this is your position, let's compromise, let's, everybody give something, and we'll come up with a deal that everyone likes, right? But this isn't a normal situation, right? So the Republican position basically is boiled down to, we will fund the government, open the government back up, if you give us big concessions, which you've already given big concessions, but we want more big concessions, right? So the Democrats are saying, well, funding the government is not something to give away in a debate. It's not something to give away in a negotiation. You don't say, well, our position is funding the government. What is your position? That's just doing your job, right? It's not a position to give away. But Republicans want you to believe that funding the government is something to negotiate away. They come to the table and they say, well, our position is opening the government and doing our jobs. Now you go. That's not how negotiations are supposed to work. I mean, how it's supposed to work are Democrats come to the table and say, we would like taxes, we'd like to raise taxes in order to pay for roads and bridges, and Republicans say, well, we agree that roads and bridges should be paid for, but we don't want to raise taxes. Okay, well, the common ground is we want to build roads and bridges. How do we do that? Well, we've got to figure out a way that incorporates both sides. But when you have one side of the debate that's basically saying, our position is funding the government, how do you negotiate with that? What do the Democrats give up? What do they say? Okay, well, if you fund the government and do your job, we'll give you tax cuts. I don't know. I don't know where they go from here with this. But this is where we are. This is where we're stuck at. Republicans will not bring the bill to the floor, so there's nothing to vote on. They keep playing games, doing gimmicks. And this is, and I'm glad the press is finally starting to come around to this, because we hear a lot of this, well, it's both sides. Both sides are responsible for this. And you know what? Both sides are not responsible for this, actually. It's one side, and it's just one part of one side, actually. It's about 80 Republicans in the House caucus, the Tea Party people, who are refusing, basically, to govern. They're basically refusing to do their job. And I think it's funny because, this is a group of people that stand up and say things like, well, we're going to drug test welfare recipients because we can't be giving lazy people handouts. And then they don't even do their basic job, which I think is pretty impressive on their part. So, well, that's it for our first podcast here. I just wanted to kind of test this out, build it out, talk a little bit about what's been going on in the news. Hopefully we keep up with this on a weekly basis. Hopefully we get some listeners. Put some comments down in the comments section. Like our status, share our stuff. Help us spread the word with this because it's new. And if nobody listens to it, there's no point in doing this. So, give us some feedback. All right, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Goodbye.